Conjunction junction, what's your function? Hey y'all, I'm Madeline Monahan, but you can call me Maddie. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm just gonna do a chill little chit chat. But I just wanted to sit down with my little coffee cup and tell you guys a little bit about my writing journey and how it started, how I got to where I am, and really what I plan on doing in the future. I started writing when I was about 5 or 6 years old. That's my earliest memory of actually sitting down and putting words on paper. Before that, I would just take a piece of paper and write scribbles on it and pretend I was writing. But I always loved writing. I always loved the feeling of creating something. I'd always pretend to tell a story before I actually knew how to write. And my first real writing memory, I was actually at my Mema and Grandpa's house in Oklahoma. And oh god, I miss that house so much. They live in Colorado now, so that house we no longer go to, but it was an amazing house. It was a place that everybody always looked forward to going to, because Mema and Grandpa's house was the coolest thing ever. And they had a very cozy kitchen. It was kind of like a galley kitchen, but it was like a very country galley kitchen, if that makes sense. It just felt like home. You'd walk in and you immediately would just relax and feel at ease. And they had this little breakfast nook with beautiful large windows that overlooked the yard, and it had like a what are those things called? A window bench next to the table. My first real writing memory is being at in that little breakfast nook, looking out of that big window, overlooking the deck, overlooking the yard. You could kind of see the gazebo up top of the hill, and just writing whatever the heck came to mind. And I had a stack of paper with me and a pencil, and I just started writing, "Once upon a time in a faraway kingdom there was a king and a queen," you know, kind of your basic fairy tale stuff. And I don't know how long I sat there for, but I think ended up with a maybe almost, I think, a 10-page story. Like, I just kept writing, and I kept writing, and I kept writing, and then I showed it to my Mema, and my Mema was like, "Oh wow, you should be a writer." That was just the moment where it clicked for me that this was something fun that I could do and do a lot of, and I had like an endless supply of things I could put down on paper. And so from there it was just a downward spiral. As soon as Mema said that, it was a downward spiral. So the reason I'm here today is because of my Mema, so thanks, Mema. I drank coffee in your honor. So after I got my encouragement from my Mema, I just really started writing more, kind of just anything that came to mind. I didn't really know anything about telling stories, and I wasn't really reading either at this point in time. Reading had always been something that was very difficult for me, and it was very easy for the words to get jumbled on the page, so it was hard for me to stay focused on the words. So I would get frustrated with a book and I would give up and I wouldn't read it. I think my mom found out that I wasn't actually reading books. I was just looking at the pictures in the books. I wasn't actually reading the words, I was just looking at the pictures. When I was about 7. So I really didn't learn how to really read until I was about 7. Like, I knew words and I knew how to write, but I would never go back and read them. You know, I didn't read, which is, it's weird, but it was like I didn't, it was like there was like a weird disconnect between me and reading versus me and writing. And then when I was about 8, I started playing around with script formats, and I would write just scripts. My parents had this old video camera from like the 80s, like the ones that would still use like actual tapes, like actual tapes. It's a cassette player with the one cassette I have, which is Billy Joel. The video camera I had would use tapes, and so, and it's funny too because I still say I'm taping something, and things don't use tapes anymore. That was how I got my start with like making videos and stuff, is I would take this clunky old 80s video camera and I would just film stuff. Film ad-lib stuff, scripted stuff, anything that came to mind stuff. I would film shows. There was a lot that I would do with that camera. So around that time I started realizing that I liked writing scripts and screenplays as opposed to novels. And that's not to say that I didn't enjoy writing novels and short stories. I would still write short stories mostly. But there was just something about scripts that allowed me to be visual without explaining it. And that was something that was always difficult for me. And one of the frustrations I had when I was reading was that it's very hard, unless I have a basis to go off of, it's very hard for me to visualize what someone is talking about. For some reason there's this weird gap in between the description of something and how my brain sees it. Screenplays have this weird balance of description and fill in the blank. And so they describe something enough to give you the idea of what the place is or who the person looks like, but then it would be up to you as a director, I guess, what the rest of it looks like. So you sort of fill in the parts that are missing. And that's kind of the thing I like about screenplays, is that there is that fill in the blank where you can kind of take what you know and transfer it into the visual for this story. Whereas novels, it's like, it is, they're very descriptive, and so they give you all these details at once, and it's very hard to kind of keep track of what's what and what looks like what. At least for me it is. My brain has always been wonky. My brain's always been weird. In my 19, almost 20 years of writing and just writing, there are some things that I've learned, as one normally does when they've been doing the same thing for most of their life. My hair doesn't want to cooperate. Okay. One of the things I learned is that fantasy is hard. One of the first actual full-length novel attempts I made was a fantasy story I had that I got the idea actually when I was playing ESO. I was playing Somerset, and I had this idea of, like, wouldn't it be cool to see the elves as the lower class? Because, normally when you watch something like fantasy or play a fantasy game, the elves are usually like, pish posh, top class, we're better than you kind of people, right? Normally elves are just very beautiful and they're powerful, and and so that's kind of how we see them. But I was playing as a wood elf, and it just got me thinking. I was like, how cool would it be to see a story where the elves are at the bottom, not at the top? And I just thought that, and that sort of played around for a bit, and I was like, oh yeah, I could give fantasy a try. I could, famous last words.
I could give fantasy a try.
It turned into something that I was not really prepared for, and in hindsight, I did not plan it out enough before I started writing. I just sort of jumped into it because I was really excited. It just sort of sizzled and went out. But fantasy's hard. Fantasy's hard because you've got a lot of characters, you have a whole different world, you have a whole different set of rules, you have a whole different set of magic. I think it is something that should actually be planned out instead of just diving headfirst into it, because Laura knows I need help. Something else I discovered actually while I was writing my fantasy story, when I was attempting to write my fantasy story, was that stories are alive. They might not be walking, breathing creatures, but they're alive. They change, and they are the ones who are in control. You think as a writer that you are in control of your story, and you're like, haha, I know how this is gonna go. And your story just sits up and is like, look, I know you want it to go this way. It's not gonna go this way, we're gonna go this way. You just kind of have to listen to it. And there are some directions that your story takes you where it's like, okay, well this makes sense at first, but then it doesn't make sense. But then the story will come back around, it'll loop back around to you and say, hey, I realized it didn't work. we're gonna go this way now. You just sort of have to listen to it, and it's just so interesting how it really does take on a life of its own. Like, as you're writing, like, the story will tell you where to go. Your characters will tell you what they want. I do listen to my stories. Sometimes it takes me in places where I'm like, excuse me, where the heck are you going? No, we're not going that way. Ah! But it is just this amazing feeling to be creating something that is kind of in a way talking back to you. And it's just really cool. I love it. And I think that's the thing that I just love the most about writing, is that it's an adventure. It's an adventure, and even if you have it plotted down to a T, you have no idea where it's gonna go. Going on the adventure with the characters, with your story, and kind of letting your story take the reins and lead the way, it's really cool. Every day I'm writing. Looking into the future, there are so many projects that I want to do. There's so many screenplays I want to write, so many novels I want to attempt, so many books I actually wouldn't mind trying to adapt into screenplay. There's just so much that I want to do with writing that it's something that I will never tire of. It's something that has stuck with me for almost 20 years, and something that I think will stick with me for the next 20 years. And I'm hoping that, you know, someday it's something I can really make a good career out of. You know, if not, I still am gonna have all the fun in the world with it. Imagination is endless. Inspiration is endless. And as long as those two coexist with each other, I ain't never running out of story ideas. And that's the way I like it. Thank y'all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. And I'm glad that we could just take the time to sit down, have a cup of coffee, and chat, and hopefully not spill said coffee. And I will see you guys in my next video. Y'all take care. Bye. What you see before you is indeed real. Oh, and it's the end of the tape.